Hey folks, it is 2 minutes after the hour. We're going to get started. Very excited to have you with us here today. The title of this session is called Data Management Strategies that Drive Your BI Success. I think this is a great topic for where we're at in IBI's history. As many of you know, we've always had a really solid suite of data integration and data management solutions to go along with WebFocus, which is absolutely one of the best business intelligence solutions in the world. And so what we wanted to do, there are really exciting things that are happening on the data integration front with our business in terms of a new product offering that we recently rolled out. There was a full-on 45-minute session on that last week. If you want, to do a deep dive on that, go back and look at the recording for that. What we wanted to do today is introduce it, but also apply it to what sound data governance and data integration processes and policies and procedures, how that can drive your BI success. And we have a special guest with us today to help share what he is seeing in the marketplace as well. His name is Michael Moran. Who is Michael Moran? No big deal, just the who's who of industry analysts, subject matter expert on topics that are relevant to chief data officers, enterprise information management, data governance, and master data management, to name a few. He's a former vice president of research at Gartner. He is now covering that topic for Dresner Advisory Services, over 20 years of experience in the market. A couple cool things about Michael. He's a U.S. Navy veteran, and I'm a little jealous. He got his master's in business administration from the University of Hawaii. So really excited to have him here with us today. I'm Porter Thorndike. I'm a principal product manager spanning the data integration and business intelligence products at IBI. I want to give you 5 minutes on the new product that we introduced, what we're seeing in the marketplace. Then I'm going to hand it over to Michael, and I will conclude with how we see kind of some of these sound data integration practices actually impacting your business intelligence initiatives. So the product that we are launching, it's very exciting. It's called IBI Data Intelligence. It brings together diverse data management functionalities, but it brings it together in a single integrated offering. So that means things like the backend and the security and the data governance and the metadata management and the user interfaces are integrated. Truly a single integrated offering. And, we've always been really strong at, connecting to a wide variety of source data, legacy sources of data, IoT and streaming, relational, third-party sources of data, APIs, things like that. So what's really cool about data intelligence, it's really got all of these key core capabilities to help you take completely unstructured, ungoverned, dirty data and send it through where the other side, you've got this single source of truth, trusted data, high quality data to drive a number of your business intelligence initiatives. It covers things like application and data integration to take those variety source data sources and integrate them and potentially transform them or move them for a variety of purposes. Sometimes it's so that it's fit for analytics or reporting. Sometimes it's for a different downstream operation. And typically, once data has gone through that process, a lot of people are looking to inject some data quality processes and evaluations on it, potentially to even master that data. And Michael's going to be touching on a lot of the things that he's seeing across all of the different customers that they work on and the technology market itself. So what does that mean for our customers who maybe in the past have owned one component of this? Well, really, we see that showing up as something that we call a data management maturity model. And we see customers at every step of this model. What's been really cool is that as we've worked with customers over the years, we've actually been with many customers on the journey where they have started at this point. And we see customers at every step of the journey. It's kind of great to go with them through these through these steps. So many customers we work with, they start with what we would call a reactive type of maturity model. Issues around data quality or governance are arising, and it's a very reactive type of approach that they have when problems arise. The majority of our customers, I would say, are at this point, which is siloed. So they've got solutions across those capabilities, but it might be from a number of different vendors, and that makes it very difficult to integrate between those different capabilities. That the licensing and the cost is typically much higher when you've got a broad variety of vendors doing all of these things. Onboarding is more difficult, different user interfaces. How does it integrate? And so we think that data intelligence is really going to allow our customers and other organizations to go from a siloed approach to a more coordinated approach where all of these capabilities can communicate with each other, single integrated metadata layer, right? Common user interfaces and backends and APIs and security models to a more coordinated level throughout. And once you get there, really you can advance to having true governance around policies, procedures, potentially stewardship in place across that organization. Really where we want to get everyone is to that proactive level where line of business objectives set by, let's say, an executive leadership team can actually drive different data governance projects to better inform decision-making and business outcomes for organizations. And looked at another way, we call it the data value chain. As data goes through this value chain from connection and movement to fixing and relating and governing, when it comes out the other end, what you've got is probably the single most valuable asset an organization can have, which is trusted data, high quality data that can be used to deploy a number of different business intelligence initiatives, both, kind of like traditional ones that a lot of people are familiar with, and even a lot of the kind of the cool ones around generative AI and augmented analytics and predictive analytics as we look to the future. That's a quick introduction on the product and what we're seeing with our customers. I want to hand it over to Michael to broaden all of our perspectives on what Dresner is seeing in the marketplace. So, Michael, I will stop sharing and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Porter, and that was quite the introduction. We'll see whether I merit that. What I wanted to address from the Dresner point of view is why? Why should anyone undertake this work across the management of data, whether it's data quality, whether it's data governance, whether it's master data management or any of that? And what really resonates strongly with me was that business value slide there, Porter, because it ultimately, in an ideal world, and we do not live in an ideal world, but in an ideal world, we're actually looking to use data to drive business value. But we've been hampered by that. You touched upon the silos that are out there, and it's quite understandable why those silos exist, because from the outset of what we would describe as high technology, and then certainly since the big software days, organizations have been addressing business problems on an application-centric basis, right? I'm a manufacturer, so I need to go get me an ERP. Oh, we want to be customer-centric, so we need to get us a CRM, and then increasingly a 360-degree view or customer 360-degree. And then even if it's internal HR, then we need to go get us an HRM. And so we've seen this propagation of silos. And then those of us who are in the data space who've understood the importance of integrating data have been forced to try to figure out how to start to stitch all this data together, but doing so on the backside. And that also then engenders the requirement for data quality and data governance and master data management and all of that. So what we're seeing in the marketplace from the perspective of our surveys and then the research that we publish from those surveys is a need to approach this differently. And that is, we propose that starts to be approached from what we call a data-centric perspective. So give me a moment to build this out from a Gartner, old habits die hard. From a Dresner perspective, what we're seeing in the world is there's operational data infrastructure. This is all the data infrastructure that supports all the operational applications, the ERPs, the CRMs, the HRMs, and what have you. And then we're also seeing an application data infrastructure, which is almost hopefully wholly separate and distinct. And that's supporting all the BI applications and increasingly things, data science, and then machine learning and artificial intelligence. And there's a need to then pivot from an application-centric approach to a data-centric approach. And at that, we suggest that you start with the data. And with starting with the data, and we're not proposing every rip and replace everything, because that's just not going to happen. This is really a mindset that going forward, understand what the context of the data is for. What are the business value chains? What are the supporting critical business processes that are driving your business? What's the data that's required to support those things? And then understand that. And then, of course, master data will be at the heart of that. Governed data will also be critical to that. And then there'll be data that's not governed, but is also important to supporting those processes. And you'll need to know where that is. So data catalog. And then we can start to, or you as the end user can start to build your data persistence layers and then the data pipelines to then feed the applications. So it's really working from the business-centric perspective outwards towards the applications. What we're seeing of those organizations that are doing that is the business requirements informed data architecture. The data architecture in turn determines the flows to and from the enterprise applications, which enables you to start to achieve balance across both the operational and the application data, or sorry, the analytical data infrastructure, and therefore have deliberate design for data persistence and storage. And importantly, these organizations are beginning to distinguish themselves by way of competitive differentiation, right? How do we know this? Is we're seeing this in our survey. So Dresner's been at the survey business for in excess of 15 years. And here's in that we survey what are the top technologies and initiatives strategic to support business intelligence, because our bent is analytics and business intelligence. Here you can see for 2022, we surveyed 51 technologies and initiatives and stack ranked them. And at the top, there are reporting, data visualization, and dashboards, which historically have been towards the top. What's interesting here is governance is number 10, master data management is number 17, and metadata management is number 26 in this survey. So if we step forward into 2023, a couple of interesting things to note. We increased the survey to 59, and in so doing, we broke out data security and data quality as separate line items, and you can see they immediately went to the top of the list, pushing reporting, dashboards, and data visualization, which were the historic top of the list, down into positions 3, 4, and 5. Interestingly, governance remained at number 10, master data management remained at number 17, and metadata management increased to 25. And this is in the face of the basis increasing from 51 to 59. So clearly there is importance here, as we've noted across the bottom, critical, very important, that these are really considered important by organizations to focus upon. If we dive into master data management initially, and I've been at master data management since 2007, so way too many years of my life have been dedicated to this esoteric but incredibly important topic. What I see here is something that kind of gives me heart. So we began, Dresner began publishing or addressing research on the topic of master data management in 2022. And this kind of gives me heart because what we can see is those organizations that assessed master data management to be critical or very important was in excess of 61%. That's great. And then you can see those organizations that see it as important or somewhat important or not important at all. If we consider 2023, wow, something dramatic happened here is we see a huge jump in the assessed criticality of master data management and an increase in very important. So together, combined categories went from in excess of just over 61% to 76.1%, an increase in 1 year increase of 14.17% of critical and very important. Also, interestingly, on the other side of the spectrum was a decrease of those organizations that thought that MDM was only somewhat important or not important at all. And that decreased to 5.7%. So a decrease year over year of 9.5%. And even those organizations that simply thought master data management was important decreased by 5.3%. So we're clearly seeing a trend from those organizations that don't think MDM is particularly important to not important at all, to not only very important, but critical to their organizations. That does my heart well. Usage, though, presents a different picture altogether, not particularly encouraging from a long-time master data management analyst. We see in our survey data that those organizations that are using an MDM solution today was only 13.1% reported that, and 4.9% currently are implementing an MDM solution. And we see very high numbers on the, well, we're evaluating, we may use an MDM solution in the future, or no, we don't have any plans for this. But if we consider what's happened in 2023 in our survey, we see huge increases on the, yes, we're using an MDM solution and we're currently implementing. So a combined category of 27.8%, which represents a 9.8% year over year uptick in the combined category of yes and implementing. And the same thing over on the other side of the spectrum, we saw a huge decrease in those organizations reporting no plans, year over year decrease of 10.5%. And when we consider the combined category of may or no, that decrease year over year 9.1%. So again, a trend moving from right to left of no, it's not particularly important. Well, we may use it. We're not going to use it in moving in the direction of master data management. So although it's been a long time coming, it does seem that master data management is finally beginning to move towards its spot in the daylight here in the sunshine. So that's a good thing to see. Again, why does this matter though, right? Why should anybody spend $1 or a person or time doing this stuff called master data management? And again, it's in the survey data here. So when we did a crosstab of those organizations on a self-reported basis, what is their level of success with business intelligence? Is it completely successful? Is it somewhat successful? Or is it somewhat successful and unsuccessful? We can see here that those organizations that report MDM as critical reported 50% completely successful. And you can see that differentiates itself from the other categories, even though we're seeing 40% in the somewhat unsuccessful and unsuccessful categories also reporting MDM as critical. So that brings us again back to well, let's look on those kind of the naysayers of those who reported as not important, somewhat important, or only important. And what we see is that's where the differentiation is those organizations that are completely successful only had a 10% combined category of somewhat important and a total absence of not importance at all. So clearly a recognition of the importance of MDM to contributing to the success of their BI efforts. And we contrast that with those that report it's only somewhat successful or somewhat unsuccessful, where it's hovering at around 30% of the combined important, somewhat important, or not important. And when we consider MDM vendor ratings, and again, this isn't Dresner rating the MDM vendors, these were our survey participants who are rating across the 6 categories that we assess MDM solutions, we can see that IBI has distinguished itself in the number 2 position there. So kudos to IBI for achieving that. That's not an easy thing to do, and as you can see, in some quite distinguished competition there. If we broaden the scope to governance, so we open it up, because really all master data is governed, or should be, but not all data is governed, but there is data that should be governed that's not simply master data. So this combines. If we look at that, again, from a survey perspective on the feature requirements of governance, what's interesting here is of those items that we identified for surveying, all but one crossed the threshold of at least 80% thinking that it was at least important. So that combined critical, very important, and important. And 6 of them identified here crossed the threshold of in excess of 50% at the very important level. So again, we're seeing that not only is there important for things, master data management and data governance, but we're beginning to identify what those feature requirements are that end user organizations such as yourself are identifying as critical and very important. We flip over to data governance organization activities. So if your organization has a data governance organization, which on behalf of Dresner, we would recommend you do so. If you do so, what are those organizations focused upon? So we identified these 5 here. And again, all but one of them crossed the threshold of at least 80% at least at the level of importance. So again, the combined categories of critical, very important, important. And we can see that the top 3 are access control, and then documentation, and capture and curation. So it's more management of data, and that's important. That's very important. And then we have some practical applications of governance on the bottom 2. So active management of rights of authorship at the record and attribute level. That's right. Who has the rights to make a change to the data that is governed, and that's important because the change there impacts the entirety of the organization, or at least a broad swath of the organization. And then with the rise of machine learning and artificial intelligence models, then increasingly there's this notion that, oh, these things need to be under lifecycle management, so a governance of its own sort. That was the one that didn't make the cut. That was interesting. But when we consider, again, the crosstab against success with BI, we see relative parity across the completely successful, the somewhat successful, and the combined categories of somewhat unsuccessful and unsuccessful for the maintenance activities there. And interesting to note here, we can see that those reporting somewhat unsuccessful and unsuccessful in their BI, that they really tended to seem to focus on the documentation of data objects, so the cataloging aspects of data governance, which is important. But I want to draw your attention to those organizations that really started to break out with self-reporting of completely success with their BI initiatives, and that is on the active side of data governance, right? So the active management of rights of authorship, and then the lifecycle management of ML and AI. You can see a real breakout there on a weighted average basis. So this is why these things matter. If we level it up then to consider the importance of governing BI content and creation by sharing, again, crosstab with success by BI. We see linear correlation. This is from right to left versus left to right, but we can see those that are organizations that are self-reporting completely success with their BI initiatives, that they're in excess of 50%, considering that it's critical, the criticality of the importance of governing BI content creation and sharing. And again, we're also seeing a similarity with the not so positives, where they're only considering it important or somewhat important, and again, the total absence of not important. And that's also beginning to manifest itself in the data. When we consider data governance organizations by success with BI, we're seeing strong linear correlation between those organizations that are reporting as completely successful versus those that are not. And then what's important ultimately is achieving common trust in data governance, because if you're going to be a data-centric organization and making the basis of your business decisions using data and analytics to support that, then you really need to achieve that common trust. And again, we're seeing high linear correlation. Again, not only on the positive side of the spectrum in terms of what are at the highest levels of achieving common trust in data, but also then on those organizations that are not achieving, that are below average or average in terms of achieving common trust. So this is that aspect about the maturity model. We're seeing it again also in data-driven decision making. Again, high correlation with the low levels of only some of the time and frequently or never, and also on the high side of the all the time, most of the time, where these organizations are completely successful. Where does this lead us to ultimately? This leads us, we also have a maturity model. There are lots of organizations out there with maturity models. And what's important is the highest levels of maturity are those organizations that really start to achieve common trust in data. So in the hyper-decisive maturity model, which is Dresner's, it's really achieving data as truth. You have high trust, and that serves to support all the other dimensions of the maturity model that really enable those organizations to distinguish themselves from their competition who have not achieved those levels of maturity in data, whether it's data management, data governance, things master data management. And with that, I'll switch it back and hand it back over to you, Porter.
Thanks, Michael. Always enlightening. I've had the the benefit of reading a lot of Michael's research. I love it. I encourage anyone that wants to learn more or read more about Michael's research to head out to the Dresner Advisory Services website. I'm like, as many of you may know, I'm kind of a technology dork. I'm like, love to read analyst reports, and I've got a bunch of Michael's bookmarked, and I'm taking screenshots and writing notes to share internally or sometimes with our customers. So to me, when we think about data integration and data governance, if you're going to look at its impact on business intelligence initiatives, what does that look like? Because obviously there are data governance and data integration initiatives taking place that impact the organization far beyond just business intelligence. But business intelligence, super strategic, important component of every organization's strategy and technology platform. And to me, the biggest benefit that we see from business intelligence is to inform better decision making. And so to me, when you pair high quality, trusted, governed data with business intelligence, you get that single source of the truth that can better inform decision making throughout the organization. That's why we're here. But what does that look like across a variety of business intelligence initiatives? If we think back to the data value chain, if we think back to everything that Michael just presented, what is the result of that high quality data? How are people using it? We're taking a look right now at a view of data in the Web Focus Hub, okay? And so we're actually have some really exciting roadmap projects to take this kind of like data, this library of data assets, and add in some more formal data catalog types of functionality. But it works great right now in terms of exposing a library of high quality data assets, okay, that have gone through integration and governance and cleansing, and it is fit for analytics initiatives. And so as you use that, one view would be from the hub or from, a data catalog type of view. And that is where your organization and personas across data and analytics can benefit from that data. The single most valuable resource, I believe, is high quality data that an organization could have. What we've been seeing, I've been at IBI for about 23 years, And what we've seen, how we've seen customers benefit from this from a business intelligence perspective with IBI has been through by being able to support large-scale deployments. You cannot support a large-scale deployment or a customer-facing application with large volumes of users and data if it's not built on the foundation of that trusted data. So many of our customers have used our data integration technologies to provide that. Many of our customers may have other vendors in the mix to provide it, but it is essential as the foundation of a large-scale deployment. This is a screenshot of a wealth management application that goes to financial advisors, but we have a lot. We're supporting a lot with banks. We're doing citizen-facing applications with cities and states and municipalities, the federal government, and more. And if you're going to be informing large numbers of users, in this case, a financial advisor, on things like predictions on what will happen with their securities or identifying an investor or customer at risk, you cannot do it if you don't have that clean, trusted, high-quality data. Really cool thing that our customers have been doing for a while as well, built on the foundation of that data, is actually monetizing it. So a lot of times when you stand up a customer-facing deployment, there are things that can be built into it. If you are to white label and embed the web-focused solution, you might be able to include some things that your competition is not including in their customer-facing application. A couple examples. We could do an interactive e-statement is one that people like a lot, burst and distribute it. Another one is a lot of people may want access to their data with a web-based ad hoc report writing tool or visual analytics solution. So these are kind of some things that help people differentiate their business, acquire more customers, retain more customers, increase customer satisfaction. Some people even expose that data and sell that data as well. So that's really how we've been seeing our customers benefit from high quality data in the past. As we look to the future, though, if you were to say, Porter, the last 5 years, last 10 years, looking forward, we've got people in the line of business using self-service data preparation tools in visual analytics solutions. Well, a lot of people think that people are using this just with like emerging data sets important to the business, spreadsheets, third-party sources of data, and creating custom data sets for specific purposes, or visually exploring it to identify relevant insights, patterns, and trends. And I will tell you that these solutions in these use cases in business intelligence are incredibly more valuable when you start infusing and injecting these types of exercises with that trusted data. So if you're creating a data preparation flow that is a combination of a trusted source of data with that Excel spreadsheet or third-party data source, you are going to arrive at infinitely more insightful and accurate insights, whether that be a data flow or a data visualization or story to impact that decision-making. Really cool thing that we actually see happening as well is that users that are creating self-service data preparation flows, these new data sets become so valuable to the business, they end up going back through this governance process. So, if you're using solutions out there for these types of initiatives, they are infinitely more valuable when you inject trusted high-quality data into those. And then looking into the future, if you've read about augmented analytics or generative AI, augmented analytics takes on a lot of forms. It could be model training and deployment, but I really like the machine-generated data story. You cannot put solutions, like we have one and there are others, to produce machine-generated data stories on low-quality data. What you're going to get is a data story that may inform an incorrect action or decision to line of business leaders. So if you want to do machine-generated data stories, if you want to offer up natural language query to your customers and you want it to be accurate and you want it to be performant, it better have gone through all of that data governance and data integration. And in closing, some really cool examples of how our customers have used high quality data to roll out predictive and prescriptive analytic applications to help used car dealerships save money by identifying customers that are at risk of default, that are applying for a car loan. We have a lot of universities that are retaining students, identifying at-risk students. In hospitals, we're using high-quality data and this information to reduce readmissions. In the law enforcement sector, we're using this data to reduce traffic accidents. Identifying where we think crime will occur, identifying where we think traffic will occur, being more proactive about it. And then what's really cool, some of our customers take it to the next level, and actually prescribe a course of action based on the foundation of this data. The best treatment for a high-risk patient. We have an at-risk student. Well, what's the best career change to keep them at the university? Preventative maintenance. We see a lot of this across warehouses or with fleets of vehicles, or the best way to allocate the available resources. So super excited really to just share with you this new product that we're launching, IBI Data Intelligence, how we see it impacting our customers and how it can impact your business in the future. Michael, really appreciate you broadening our view in terms of what you're seeing in the marketplace as well. And what we'd like to do, I've got Katie Frame on the line here as well to assist with any Q&A. If you have any questions, feel free to type them into the chat and we will actually answer some of these right now. I'll take it back to the title slide here. And I did see the first question that came in. I have some thoughts on this, Michael, but I'll maybe let you start. The question is, do we need to decouple data from applications?
Well, there are a few things in the world that you need to do, but you would be well served to decouple data from applications. Just think on it in this way here is, to the extent that you don't decouple data from applications, you are outsourcing your data architecture to an extent to your vendors of choice, right? So let's consider for a moment of, well, what does the data model for a customer look like from, I don't know, say a Salesforce.com perspective? And does that meet your need? Or is there some tweaking that you need to do? And then when you consider that, oh, you might need a customer 360, or there's some other application such as service application that also has a customer data object. Well, how compatible are those two? And then they're likely not compatible because one is from vendor A, Salesforce.com, and one is from vendor B. And those two people weren't working together to come up with a harmonized data object for customer or anything else. And then there's likely a need for you to integrate that data so we understand it's this Michael Moran and not that Michael Moran. And that doesn't even get into the issue of mastering the data for those data objects that are critical to your business processes, things like customer, product, vendor, supplier, and the like. So to the extent that you can begin to decouple data from the applications and take those data elements that need to be governed, those data objects that need to be mastered because there's importance to achieving high quality, high integrity, high trust it's not so much a single view of data because there are multiple views of a particular data object, but achieving a rendering of that data object. So therefore it's consistent irrespective of the context in which it's being invoked, in which you're acting upon that. And that you have confidence in that data, and you can take the action of the data, say in the Salesforce.com, and it shows up appropriately within the customer service application support. So, and that's what we're seeing from the Dresner perspective is organizations are increasingly looking to decouple their data from their applications, and they're beginning to achieve that. And folks, this is the debate about data mesh, data fabric. That's not very well defined. It's still being sorted out there, but that's what that's really starting to address is that decoupling of data from the application layer. Porter, did you have anything you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, I think it's great. I mean, I'll take a very IBI centric, approach here. Is that, and so absolutely, we would recommend that you decouple data from applications, and a couple of successful customers that we've seen do this. There are two kind of customers that we've seen go through really high quality master data management type of process, and all of the application integration and transformation and quality happened before you had that. But we've got, a hospital that owns our whole suite of data integration technologies and web focus for business intelligence. And they underwent a process to actually integrate 32 different sources of data and master all of the key entities that you might have across a hospital. And they did this, and web focus was not a part of this until they had the golden records of all of those entities. And web focus is not the only consumer of those mastered entities. And so to me, the value of decoupling data from the applications is the reuse that you get across the organization. For business intelligence, yes, let's be real. Most of our customers own more than one business intelligence solution. They do. And so if you decouple it, then you can reuse it across different data and analytics objectives, right? There's downstream, data types of applications and projects. There's business intelligence application, but really what you end up with is you end up with that high quality data that can be reused elsewhere. It's not kind of built as part of a data integration and reporting application where it's tied together and the data's harder to pull apart. And we've got a city in Canada that actually integrated 100 sources of data and mastered the single view of a citizen. So like imagine the reuse that a large city would get out of having decoupled data and a mastered, single source of truth of their citizens, spanning, 100 different source data points as well. And we've got bank customers. We've got this application that's really cool. It's called, it's like an open banking type of accelerator where it's pulling in streaming data like transactional data. It's pulling in master data management. It's pulling in historical data. And these things are not possible. They are possible, but it's not easy if the data isn't decoupled. So we've got another question here. Michael, what steps do I take to define my data governance strategy with my technologies, if you wouldn't mind addressing that?
Sure, not at all. Again, I want to acknowledge at all points, there are organizations that have substantial resources in terms of money, in terms of people, and time invested. So when I address these things from a Dresner perspective, the questions from a Dresner perspective, I want to acknowledge that there are no light switch changes, nor are there any really effective rip and replace. That's just not going to drive or derive value for organizations. But so it's adopting, though, a new approach. So if we consider that the need to decouple data increasingly from applications, then what's the context that's driving? Because historically, you just adopted the context that was the application, whether it was ERP or CRM or product information management or HRM or any other host out there. The question then becomes, well, what's the context? And the context I submit to you that needs to be front and center are, what are the business value chains that your organization are trying to execute within the business, within the market the markets that you choose to participate in? Those are the primary contexts. The secondary context then are, what are the critical business processes that are supporting those business value chains? And then that's when you start to identify, and that's when you can begin to see the real value of identifying those critical business objects that should be decoupled and should come under governance. And they should become under governance at least the departmental or regional level, if not at the enterprise level. And the first things that come to mind are the objects. If you think in terms of the sentence, the objects around which your business value chains take action, things like customers, products, vendors, suppliers. Those are the things that should be governed. So it's a matter of understanding the business context, indicating what are the objects, the data objects that are contributing directly to those business value chains into the critical business processes, identifying what those objects need to look like. That also from that you begin to identify how those objects need to be governed, right? I submit to you that if you start to consider that, and if your organization is in the business of selling things or services or objects, that customers are a pretty critical data object, and it shouldn't be outsourced to anybody on the IT or the data side of the house, because I would imagine sales, or at the very least marketing, should be the one who is defining what customer looks like, and therefore standing forward in terms of adopting increasingly what we're seeing out there in the marketplace of data as product, not necessarily to sell, although that can be done when you achieve that, and you touched upon that, Porter, but data as product. I own the customer, therefore I'm responsible for ensuring the integrity and the trust of that customer data, and then sharing that with all the organizations within my company that support the one or more business value chains that we're executing that involve customer or product or vendor or supplier. Anything you want to add to that?
That was great. Thanks, Michael. I'm ready. I'm ready to embark on my own data governance. That's all I need to know. One of the great things about Dresner is they actually have a lot of research just specifically on that. So Michael just gave the highlights, but absolutely encourage you to check them out. And they've got more in-depth reports on that very specific topic, and they obviously offer advisory services as well. We had another question come in from Paul, and he's asking about when you've got data lakes, how can you maintain the single source of truth, or do we have to have constant ETLs? Is the data stored in one warehouse? What are you seeing in the market there?
That's a tricky one, but that's necessary. There was a necessary rise of data lake technology because there was the challenge of getting data at volume into persistence layers, so data warehouses, right? Because that schema on write, and that was really slowing things down. And we had the age of big data, and so it was necessary to capture all that data, and you couldn't. The schema on write technologies were just too slow, so thus the schema on read technologies came to the fore, data lakes and what have you, that enabled the capture of all that data. So it solved that particular problem, which was onboarding and persisting data. It did create other issues, because if it's schema on read and the read aspect was not being controlled, we're back to, well, whose definition of customer is correct? Because I read the data using a schema that met my needs. Porter, you developed a schema that read the data for customer in the way, or product in the way that you needed. And guess what? It wasn't consistent. And therefore, we're back to arguing whose reports are correct, because the underlying data was different because of the way it was pulled from the data lakes. So what we're seeing, organizations are beginning to understand that. And therefore, you can work. Well, first, there are there are new technologies. I'm not here to advocate for any specific, but you can think of things like data or Snowflake and Databricks, which are able to onboard data now at substantial volumes, and they don't have the schema on write problems that were causing the issues in the past. And even if you still have data lakes, then there's the whole notion of the data lakehouse now. So therefore, what you're governing is the schema on read. So this is the way those models, those schemas are coming under governance. Therefore, you can draw the data when you need to, and you can composite that data when necessary on the fly. But what you're now governing is the schema model. So therefore, you can get consistent representation at the model level while the underlying attributes can continue to change. And whether that's going into something like cloud technology such as Databricks or Snowflake, or whether that's flowing into a data lake, or the continued persistence of data warehouses. So the notion here of governance is expanding from strictly data objects, master data of customer, product, vendor, supplier, to now start to encompass things like schemas for the read to support that, of data lake approaches. And then we're also beginning to see the importance of governing other models such as machine learning and artificial intelligence models. Hopefully that addressed that question.
Great, thank you. And the last question that we have, unless we get more, is something we all deal with here, right, in our personal lives, and that everyone is dealing with in their organization. Right? There's all of these tools. I want them all. But what should be the top priority for someone's budget? Where is the best place to spend your money first?
Yeah, that can become a dilutive exercise really rapidly, particularly if you approach it purely from a data-centric perspective, because it's like, oh, we need high quality, high trusted data. Therefore, we need to apply that equally to all our data, which is a fallacy. It really is. So again, the Dresner point of view is to start first with the business context. What are the business value chains? What are the critical business processes? What are the highest priority ones for your organization? That's going to lead you to what is the data required to support those business value chains and the critical business processes. And that can start to address questions or open up questions, which is, okay, well, what data needs to be mastered? What data needs to be governed? And what data needs to be neither mastered nor governed, because that's things like, I don't know, account balances, right? That just ebbs and flows with whatever the notion is, but does need to be controlled. And increasingly, what is the level of quality? What is the level of governance that needs to be applied? Because there's nothing for free. And ultimately, if you bear with me here for a moment, we're talking about achieving prescribed or objective confidence intervals in data, right? And it's one thing to achieve a confidence level of data to support, say, a marketing campaign for Christmas cards, right? It's a whole other thing if you're talking about patient data and health decisions are being made. So that's a level of confidence interval that needs to be necessarily much higher. So then you can start to then figure out from the basis of the business value chains, from the data that is required to be mastered, to be governed, what are the confidence intervals, therefore the level of quality, therefore the trust that needs to be attained. How do we need to spend the money? Where is that what are the technologies that are currently supporting those requirements? And as we're seeing now, not only with IBI, but with others out there, that there are integrated capability offerings coming online, such as the IBI data intelligence here, that does it make sense to then begin to invest in integrated technology capability, and you can begin to start to retire those silos of technology that may or may not have been integrated by your organization to actually meet the data trust, the governance requirements, the confidence interval requirements that you've identified necessary to your organization. So it all should be driven from a business context perspective, not simply because it's the shiniest bauble out there, not because somebody has a comfort level with technology A versus technology B. Really, what is driving that? What's the need? And therefore, what's the relative return of the organization for investing a dollar in the legacy technologies versus investing in a new technology such as IBI data intelligence? And what we'll see, what we imagine going forward, and our research is beginning to indicate this, is we're seeing a convergence of these things: data quality, data governance, master data management, model ops, that are going to start to increasingly drive the demand for integrated capabilities, integrated data governance capabilities.
Thanks, Michael. Eric is asking a great question that I think would benefit a lot of the customers on the line that are more, that are web focused customers, which is there are people that are new to the subject. And so curious what your high level definition of governance and management of data is, in addition to what does it actually mean to decouple data from applications?
Well, decoupling, let's kind of work backwards, right? So, and that if we consider how data currently, the majority of data is actually coupled, particularly on the operational side, the data is coupled to the application, right? You can, whatever your choice of, say, CRM or HRM or Salesforce automation or ERP, that data is manifested within that application, those data objects and how that's integrated in there. And that's all controlled by the application and the data architects of the vendor. To the extent that one assumes and would assume correctly that those applications are providing a level of management for that data within the context of the application. That's fair. But when you start to pose the question of master data in particular, then it's like, oh, well, we need to define customer, and our definition of customer exceeds the scope of our choice of Salesforce automation or our CRM, because we also need to make use of that customer data over here in these other operational applications. And importantly, as you've identified previously, in our BI and intelligence tools, right? We need to consider we need to run analytics on our customer data, and therefore that needs to be made available in the context of the BI and analytics tools as well. So there's the question of, well, then we need to decouple that data to achieve the definition of the master data objects in particular, but there are also data objects that should be governed, not necessarily mastered. Those are, none immediately come to mind, but there are those data objects that it's not necessarily mastered within an organization, but you don't want people willy-nilly changing the definition of that data object, nor do you want them changing the attributes of that on a less than control basis. I mean, that's what governance is all about. There's a process to govern how to define a data object and what are the values that compose the attributes of that data object. Once we start to understand that then identifies those things that what needs to be governed. Back to, and this is a bit sounding circular, I appreciate that, and I apologize. You want to differentiate between those data objects like account balances that need to be controlled and access to them, because we don't want people changing my account balance, but an account balance is calculated. There's nothing governed about that other than maybe the rules of calculation. But my customer data and where I live, my home address or my mobile phone number, that really should be under the control of me, and it's in your best interest to have the most accurate data. So then when I call in and I report a change in mobile phone number, it's in your best interest to capture that. You want to ensure that that's captured in the appropriate context, so when that is captured, that can be identified as an appropriate change, that governance is applied, and then that change is propagated across the master customer data object that represents Michael Moran. So now that's available across the entirety of the enterprise. And that change only needed to happen one place, as opposed to you've got multiple changes that are occurring in different silos, and then they're competing and in contention and driving friction into the process to identify what is the accurate data, what is the trusted data, and can you trust that to make business decisions.
Thanks, Michael. I know we're at the hour, and so I just have one more question for you. And obviously, Dresner doesn't, endorse any specific vendor and not asking for an endorsement. But I'm curious what your view of the future is, or what you've seen. We obviously think there's great potential benefit for an organization going from siloed solutions across these capabilities to a single integrated offering. And we're not the only vendor that's doing that. So I'm curious if you and Dresner, if you think more organizations will move in that direction, and what the potential benefit would be to someone going with a single integrated offering versus having disparate point solutions.
So from a Dresner perspective, yes, we're beginning to see the convergence of things data. From the perspective of Dresner, we're seeing the what historically has been operational data infrastructure and application data infrastructure, because those were separate. The things that was going on in the ERP and the CRM and the Salesforce automation, then that was extracted into data persistence layers, whether those are engineering pipelines or data warehouses or even data lakes, and then pulled into the BI and analytics tools to support those requirements. We're beginning to see that, well, why wouldn't you just run your organization on a singular data set that could support not only the operational aspects and operational requirements of your organization, but also the analytical requirements of that. Interestingly, the rise of ML and AI are really serving as a catalyst in so many different ways. And one way that they're serving as a catalyst and with respect to this is, if you want the best results out of a machine learning or an artificial intelligence model, particularly when that ML or AI model is making use of your organizational data, then it needs all available data and it needs it in one place. So thus, that's really starting to drive the need for converged data. And the need for converged data is really starting to drive the uptick of demand for collapsing of the silos, because historically you buy a data quality suite, you buy a data governance suite, you buy a master data management suite. And to the degree that these things were integrated, that was on the part of the organization and the ability and the talent of the IT department of a given organization. And there was a lot of effort there, or you outsourced it to the systems integrators. Why not approach that need from an integrated perspective? So whether it's IBI's data intelligence capability or any of your competitors, then those organizations that can begin to achieve a pivot from an application-centric perspective to a data-centric perspective, they're going to benefit from these integrated capabilities at the technology level, because vendors are going to be much better at a best-in-class approach to the integration piece. Now, you're out there in the market, you might have people who choose your competitors over IBI, but overall, we see the tide is going to rise the level of all boats as the technology begins to move in this direction. The market, by way of the vendor offerings, begin to move in this direction, and organizations acquire these technologies and begin to implement them and start to really achieve that next level of IT evolution, or evolution within high tech, where the next level of decoupling or stage of decoupling is going to be data from applications.
That's great. Thank you so much. We are, excuse me, we are at time, and so it's always enlightening, and it's been amazing. I actually, I love your research. I actually enjoyed the Q&A session almost the most of this whole thing. So really appreciate your time and your expertise, and we appreciate everyone that attended this webinar. And anyone that wants more information on this topic, encourage you to head out to our website or the Dresner website, or get in touch with us or whoever your contacts are at IBI, and we will conclude the webinar. And Michael, thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Porter. It was a real pleasure.